Let's face it, rock and roll, it hasn't been very dangerous in a while.
Everyone knows what rock and roll is. It's a very large umbrella. It covers a whole bunch of stuff.
Could you say that the Gaga gimmick was an afterthought? You know, like she had the songs, but they said, nah, you need more.
She's definitely one that has the talent. Can write, can do singing, songwriting.
We started coming out to the West Coast in the early 80s. We saw Kennedy's Black Flag, Flipper, all this, really nihilistic punk rock thing. Man, there's a lot of rules in this thing. You gotta wear this chain that way, and you gotta hate this particular kind of politics. It was just like all these rules, and we're like, what are these rules about? We want to make music.
10 seconds, guys.
From Mind Rocket Studio, between Ohio and Pennsylvania, covering the culture of popular music of yesterday and today. Speaking of music, you're listening to it. With your hosts, from the Raw Alternative, Rick Polo, from SYLM, Joe Sinkovich, and Lucas Gola. Here's your anchor, Jimmy Martin.
Welcome to the Speaking of Music podcast here at Mind Rocket Studio. With us today, special guest in studio, Shiloh Hawkins from the band Blew Through Branches. On today's episode, we're going to talk about the recent comments made by Billy Corgan from Smashing Pumpkins, as well as Marilyn Manson's claim that he coined the term grunge. And with this first episode segment, we're going to go ahead and kick off by just reading you these quotes and hear what everybody has to say. Let's start off with what Billy Corgan had to say, as you know, vocalist from the Smashing Pumpkins. When asked if he looked up to Cobain, obviously Kurt Cobain, Corgan replied, "No, in the purest sense of the word, we were competitors. He and I were the top two scribes, and everybody else was a distant third." So, Rick, what's the first thing that comes to mind when you hear that quote?
Oh, man. It's a very bold statement, definitely. Very much on the egotistical side. Here's a rock star who obviously in the 90s was very prominent rock star, especially among that alternative scene, which was still something new and fresh bleeding into the 90s. And yeah, him and Kurt Cobain were, at the top, but there were many other people. I mean, you can't discredit Perry Farrell, Jane's Addiction, Trent Reznor, Nine Inch Nails, Eddie Vedder, Chris Cornell.
Jerry Cantrell.
Absolutely. And Michael Stipe, Anthony Kiedis. That alternative scene was so broad and it spanned so much territory. And really, I think, Nirvana became the poster child of grunge necessarily, but Kurt Cobain was very candid, said, hey, I love Sonic Youth. I love the Pixies. I love the Melvins. I love the Beatles. He recognized that. Mm-hmm. And I think Billy Corgan, unfortunately, if you've really paid attention to what's been going on with him, a lot of these 90s alternative era bands have had comebacks, some more successful than others. And the Pumpkins came back, I believe, 2007 with an album called Zeitgeist that it wasn't terrible. Mm-hmm. It was a pretty good record, but it didn't really click. So I think he's a little bitter.
Right. And maybe part of that is he's trying just to make a little splash to get attention, being arrogant like that, you think? Or was that just off the cuff?
I do think it's just how he sees himself. Mm-hmm. I mean, and especially if you look at some of the Pumpkins or listen to some of their newer releases, you can tell he's really trying to be in the cutting edge of music, but it feels insincere. It feels forced.
Yes, right. Let me just sort of cite an example to set up this next question. I want to see if Joe has some thoughts on this. When you're at an Olympic event and you throw the javelin, the measurement is the farthest amount of distance that you can throw that javelin. They get out there with the measurement, and this guy threw 109 feet, and the next guy throws 110 feet. Well, he's the best. He throws the farthest. So with that in mind, what scale or measurement is Billy Corgan referencing when he considers him and Cobain to be, as he says, the top two scribes, and everyone else is a distant third?
Probably in meters.
in meters. He's talking about Javelin.
Yeah, he's actually talking about actually in meters. Like he's that much further ahead. I don't know. Like, you know, you can't. He can't base it off of amount because obviously
Sales or
sales or just amount wrote, amount put out.
Okay.
Because, you know, he had how many more years on Kurt Cobain? I mean, Kurt Cobain was still around, and like by saying he was, you know, the same as, but saying everyone else was a distant third, he's still putting himself. One of them is in first place, and one of them still in second place. So he's still putting himself ahead, I think, because Billy Corgan is one of the most arrogant people. I mean, anything I've ever read from him or seen him in, like he definitely has that sense of him of just everyone should be thanking him for his inputs to what he did for that era. You know, I don't even want to say grunge music because, like, I think that there's a complete difference between what Nirvana was doing and what Smashing Pumpkins was doing. It wasn't the same style of music at all. There was a big difference there, and that whole time era.
There is no way of judging that. You know, everybody's going to have a different opinion on who's better, and those two head to head. You know, like these guys mentioned, they don't really make any sense anyhow because they were totally different.
Yeah. I don't really. I'm a big Pearl Jam fan. I like some Smashing Pumpkins. I think Siamese Dream came out in '93, and I like a lot of that album.
Long time.
But I didn't. Yeah, wasn't it? A long time ago, 1993. Man. But I thought that Pearl Jam 10 was a solid album that holds up today.
Yes.
And
Still
for him to not even put Eddie Vedder and Pearl Jam in the category with them, I think he was just off in his perspective and his opinion.
10 is definitely an album that I could still put in today.